Hello, Gideon.
Yeah, hello guys. I'm so happy to be here, and actually I'm so amazed to see you from so extremely interesting countries, and I would love to visit all your countries. I have seen a couple of them. I was actually at an amazing impact investment conference in Armenia a couple of years ago, and I met people from the Impact Hub there and so on, and it was an amazing time. So. But the rest I still have to visit in the future, and we hope we can do this very soon. Let me share my screen if I can. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So please, short confirmation that you can see everything.
Yes.
Okay, great, great. I'm not sure how it's the habit here, but I would really love to see you during my presentation. So please keep your cameras on. It helps me a lot because I normally hate this doing presentations and just seeing myself or my screen. So it would be really lovely. And also another thing, it's quite some slides because Eva asked me to cover quite a range of subjects, and since I'm not so young anymore, my journey into impact investment about what I want to speak right now is a bit long. So please, you can stop me if it's boring, and you can stop me please also with any questions. I will divide it into 2 or maybe 3 parts. We shall see how it goes. The beginning will be before Tillia Impact Ventures. And then of course I will spend the larger part of the time talking about Tillia Impact Ventures, this impact fund as such. But Eva asked me to go a little bit before that, so I will tell you what was my way into. I have an echo now. Can you hear well? Oops.
We also hear the echo.
I think we need to mute, all of us. We need to mute ourselves.
Eva, I think the echo is at your end because your computer still seems to be logged in, so the sound is coming from 2 devices.
Well, I switched that off.
Thank you, thank you. So Eva introduced me already. I'm Silke Horak.
I think it should be now, right?
Yeah, it's better now.
Very strange.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, sorry, go on.
Oh, thank you. On one slide, my professional life has been always divided into 2 parts. Actually, I forgot to mention, maybe you can hear that I'm a German living in the Czech Republic, and I moved there actually during the Velvet Revolution, which was absolutely by chance. So an amazing time. So I spent the majority of my life in the Czech Republic. I'm married here. That was my private story. And my profession is I'm a financial investor. And as such, one of our financials investments, which we did together with my husband, was Albatros Media in 2008. And I'm mentioning this because it changed our life completely. This turned out to be now our family business. We decided halfway never to sell this company. It's in the meantime the largest book publishing company in the country. So that's our family business now. But since, around 2010, I will talk a little bit about later. I have been involved very much in the social sector. And apart from Tillia Impact Ventures, I have co-founded 2 foundations. One is the Albatros Foundations, which supports disadvantaged children in education. And then I was co-founding with 12 other entrepreneurs of the Czech Republic, a fund who supports independent journalism. And related to this is Novi Denik, which is an independent medium which we invested in like 3 years ago, I guess. So let's start with this woman. I guess you don't know her, but she changed my life. I was working actually a couple for, 6 years, I guess, leading the Czech Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. And as such, it happens that I attended a large conference, private equity conference, organized by the British Venture Capital Association on the occasion of their 30th anniversary in London. So there were many, many private equity funds, all the big guys, and then this woman. And she presented something what I had never heard of before, and that was impact investment. She was one of the co-founders of Bridges Ventures. You may have heard about it. Bridges Ventures was actually the first social impact fund in Europe. Actually in the UK, I have to say, because on the continent it started like 10 years later, the entire movement, so it's not that old. And she told us that you can do both. You can do social good and have a financial return. And that was an eye opener for me. And I said to myself, wow, that's what I want to do. That's well, I will spend my life with this. So I went back to the Czech Republic, and there was nothing to invest in. You know, I was already doing investments by that time, but I couldn't find anything suitable. So what we did actually since 2011, actually, as I said, I engaged very much with the guys from the, not only from the Impact Hub and with other foundations to, let's say, develop an ecosystem for social enterprises. So there was this first, I co-created the first program, which was called Better Business, but many others followed then. So you can see here, actually until today, the kind of ecosystem we have built in the Czech Republic. And in the meantime, I have learned that's actually a bit outstanding in the entire region. We have quite a lot of these programs. Some of them are special, like the Nadace Vodafone program, which is supporting tech for good companies. You may know the Social Impact Award, which is a regional program actually for social entrepreneurship ideas, more or less from students. And there are a lot of others. And so it's mostly financed, by the way, by large foundations. And there's also later some state money came in, for example, the Edison program. The most recent or the newest additions actually reflect very much what we see in our pipeline also today, this growing interest about the climate challenge in the world. So there is actually a new accelerator program, which is called Climate Challenge and the Future of Food. And these are the newest additions. Talking about the ecosystem, I will stay for the moment that you get an entire idea. Of course, and I don't want to elaborate a lot about this, there are European money here and state funds, which is mostly grant financing. That's a word you probably know very well. Very well to mention is the social banking unit of Česká spořitelna, which is a bank belonging to the Erste Group. The Erste Group has been really, how to say, pioneering support for the ecosystem in the entire region. So I really would love to mention this here. They're doing loan financing since 2015 in the Czech Republic. Something is we co-created a little bit, and I'm very proud of this, to be frank. We have now, for the second year, a bachelor program in social entrepreneurship at the University of Economics. And for the first time this semester, also a master course. So we are very much involved in this. And I think that's very important for the entire ecosystem, because we have to educate social entrepreneurs still. What we can see now is a small but growing number of social entrepreneurs. I'm mentioning this because it became crucial for our fund, actually. And what I mean by saying social entrepreneurs, these are people, let's say in an ideal case, which have business experience, which are entrepreneurs, their expertise or education, and decide their next venture will be to solve a social problem. And I came along actually with social entrepreneurs for the first time in Vienna. I'm supporting very much also on a global level Ashoka. You may know Ashoka very well. This is a global organization supporting social entrepreneurs, not entirely in the sense of entrepreneurship, which means business models, but let's call it social innovators. And since I'm German, I was very much involved in the Vienna ecosystem. And I met quite impressive social entrepreneurs. And for example, one business model I have tried, also an interesting experiment to implement a working model from one country into the other. So I brought one of them to the Czech Republic. What we also see, but it's a very, very recent thing, we start to co-invest with classical VC funds. And that's because some of these social entrepreneurs can actually generate very interesting returns. It's very, very much at the beginning, but I see this very much coming for the future as well. And what we very lately saw, that means that was this year, very new. And I think it was a bit also our example. There are new funds arising, even in the Czech Republic, which is a small country. I wouldn't call them social impact funds, but let's call it impact-driven funds. They call themselves, for example, purpose ventures. And it just gives them a bit of touch of selecting projects in a certain way. But I will come back to the differences with social impact investment, but we are very happy that it's happening, you know. So now I jump back a little bit in time and coming to Nest. Nest, I mean, I don't have to introduce Nest here, but they have been pioneering venture philanthropy, social entrepreneurship, supporting for many, many years. And actually, they were quite active in the Czech Republic, supporting social entrepreneurs at the time, wow, many, many years ago in the 90s. And I somehow came for the first time in contact with them when I started to take over the Czech Venture Capital Association, the management, and there was a cooperation before. By that time, they left the country, unfortunately, and still we met very often at events of the private equity community, mostly at conferences in London. And there was always this, you know, let's do still something together. You're not anymore in our market represent with an office, but we want to still support it. And these were mainly people from the private equity community, which had a partnership, a long-standing relationship with this organization. So what we did, we just, I mean, something hands-on, very hands-on, I would call it. There were 9 partners, which means people from the private equity community, including myself. We put some money together, a small amount, as you can see, and we said, let's just try it. Let's just start it, how we can engage in something, yeah, let's call it engaged philanthropy approach or venture philanthropy. I mean, this name is debated nowadays, but you know what I mean. So it's not just giving grants, but it's much more. It's all this non-financial support and actually a bit approach of venture capital in how you select projects and go, you know, with supporting them. So we ended up supporting 2 social enterprises. The first one was Taxman. Both of them were, and that's a target group of Nest, supporting disadvantaged groups. Actually, yeah, both of them. So they are producing some bed sheets for hospitals, Taxman. And there was the another one, which is Fair and Bio. They're producing fair trade coffee, roasting them and marketing them and employing disadvantaged people. So what we did is, I mean, in a nutshell, something we still do somehow, but by that time it was grant giving. So you research the pipeline to perform a due diligence on these companies, which means people, the entire team was actually somehow involved. It was very nice teamwork. So we reviewed applications, we went to visit the companies, and then we provided the financing, half each of this amount. And then we worked closely with them. So that was starting with setting up a business model, developing business plans, and supporting them in leadership, which I found very, very important. And by doing this, actually, to be frank, because there was partly a language barrier, I was mostly working with them on the ground. And I found actually that both of the companies would be able to return the money. And when I discussed it with them, I said, okay, that would be even more motivating, giving a bit more pressure, but also motivation. And I said, okay, from my side, to be frank, of course, we looked at the business plan and wanted the best for the company. But if you have this perspective that the money has to come back, you look twice at the numbers. So that was actually a turning point for me. And I said, let's take this a step further. Let's do something which is, how to say, closer to investment. So, and that was the idea actually to found Tillia Impact Ventures. That was, we did this for 2 years, 2015, 2016 by that time. And what came together was also the intention of 2 large foundations to go into impact investment. And since the Czech Republic is a small market, we met, discussed to put somehow forces together. I will come back to this in a minute. Before I'm doing this, let's put it a bit into perspective of the geography. First of all, I'm not sure if I have to mention this, but from now we will talk about impact investment, what it actually is. Just to repeat, and I'm sure you all know this pretty well. In contrast to classical investment, let's see, we have this impact component here, which means the first intention of the investor is to create social good, which means that would include environmental protection and progress in society. And then on the other side, you want to generate a financial return. And actually the relationships between both is hardly debated. So we understand our fund, for example, as a impact first fund, but it's not a black and white decision, to be frank, you know. But the intention to go into impact must be, is by definition, a part of what impact investment is. Nevertheless, the most important, I would say, is, and the whole industry thinks it's very important to be accountable, to measure the impact. And measuring the impact, hold on for a second, please. I'm sorry. Is something, we will come back to this in a minute. It's something complex, and it makes progress, but it's not an easy thing to do. But we still think it's the crucial thing to actually drive impact. You have to measure it. Now, this is statistics from the EBPA, as you can see, and we are talking here about investment, impact investment in the sense of social impact funds. And Eva asked me to mention explicitly that it does not include the investment for impact, because that would the entire sector is much larger, including foundations and so on. But this is specific statistics for impact funds only. And I have to say, impact funds, if I'm not wrong, which are members of the EBA. But what's important here, what I wanted to show is a bit the geographic distribution. And that's actually where the money goes. And as you can see, in general numbers, the Central and Eastern European region has reached a much larger number in the meantime. And it jumped from 7% to, I can't even remember the number. I think it was nearly the double, if I'm not wrong. But talking about impact funds,
it's 16%.
Right?
Yeah, altogether the grant.
That would, yeah, right? that would include grant money. So talking about impact funds only, you can see it's something near to nothing. So, and I hope that will improve a lot. But let's have a closer look what's going on in the region. As I mentioned, the key players are still government money in the region, and banks managing these European funds or guarantee programs from the European Union. I would love to mention here the CE Fund Support Program, which has done really a change in the region, but to provide, let's say, small amounts of money for taking off in the sector. I mentioned already Nest, which is still a key player in the region. Talking about impact funds, there are only a few still today, less than a handful. And the first one I would like to mention is Impact Ventures in Hungary, which has raised, I think it was the first one in the region, European money. So they came to a size of 21 million, which is really great. Now recently closed Feels Good Capital Partners, which is investing in Croatia and Slovenia. Then it's us. We are a bit different because we consider ourselves, let's call it a pilot fund, since we were the first. So we don't have European money and it's rather small. And in Poland, there is some activities in this direction. The state-supported teaser started to invest, let's say, into equity-related instruments. And I would mention Simpact, which is a classical VC fund going into impact fund, who seems would attract in the near future also European money. So the ecosystem is still very, very small. And I think I would stop for a moment and ask if there are questions, because we are now turning into the Tillia story and it will take a longer time. So I'm not sure if we will start a small question round right now or at the end. It's up to you. Eva, what do you think?
May I ask just a short question? If I heard you correctly and understood, Feels Good Capital has been closed. Did you say that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well.
Did you say that Feels Good Capital has been closed now?
Yes.
Oh, what was the reason?
No, but closed
sorry.
in the sense of raising, raising the money.
Ah, okay.
Sorry, that's a financial expression. It means closing the fund means actually a good thing. Sorry.
Super, thank you.
If you have any questions, just feel free to unmute, because we are in a small group, so I think it's fine. Just feel free to unmute. And if not, then we'll continue, right?
Okay. If there are not immediate questions, we can come back, of course, later to it. So let me continue a little bit with the story of Tillia. And that's a bit the history I already mentioned. What was the case in the region was, and you remember we had all these accelerator programs with quite a number of social enterprises going through, but still somehow none of them, or very rare exceptions, would really scale. So one of the reasons was the non-availability of risk capital. So that was one reason which was obvious. And then I mentioned it met also with the intention of two large foundations to go into impact investment. They had thought about it, and it appeared to them, and still appears, as a very effective way to use grant money, which will come back actually, so we can use it twice. So we sat together with the guys who had these foundations and said, let's join forces here. What was also important, and I think it's still our key asset, which makes really a difference. I did work, as I mentioned, for the Venture Capital Association, and I really talked to these people, which are top professionals from the investment sector and very well acknowledged business professionals. And I knew them also. They were by heart also philanthropists. So they are now acting on our investment committee, which makes really a difference, because it gives you a high level of professionality. Then we have I would say, highly motivated team. And I think it speaks for itself if I tell you later on how small the amount is we have raised, and doing what we are doing needs a lot of enthusiasm, because I can't really very well pay these people like I would in the investment sector, for example. And it's important, we have very different backgrounds. My background is finance and partly from the social sector. My co-founder is actually the co-founder of the Czech Impact Hub network. And it's crucial because, at least in the Czech Republic, the Impact Hub network is the center of all social activities in the Czech Republic. So we actually are, by definition, involved in all projects which are going on. Still, even myself, I'm involved in these accelerator programs. So, and his background was before also from finance. So he has more this social background, we have hired one person actually, who is our impact manager. So we have one person who has a really special expertise in impact. She worked for a Luxembourg consulting firm who advised impact funds actually. So that I think is very important. And then on the advisory board, I will show you guys later on, I actually engaged people or asked people to join, which are not from the Czech Republic. They are from European large organizations like Ashoka, one Austrian social impact business angel. So people who have a really a large experience in creating impact. And last but not least, we have a quite a big pro bono partner network. Not necessarily all pro bono, but a very important partner network. That means also legal advisors, which if necessary and useful work pro bono. Consultants, we have offered, for example, one of our investees, which I think has a high value for them, the expertise of Boston Consulting Group in redefining their expansion strategy and such things. So I think it's important to give this support to the investees as well. So, and then we ended up doing fundraising. And fundraising, as I mentioned, started with 2 anchor investors, which were 2 large foundations. That's Český spořitelny and the foundation of rich businessman and philanthrope Karel Janeček. As I said, it met with our intention to start Tillia. And then it was, I would say, attracting another 20 investors, which are all, but 2 exceptions, which I've mentioned here, private individuals. And I would call it just friends and families, you know, not in the real sense, but these are people I've known for many years from the business sector and from philanthropy, great philanthropists. And what happened here actually, these are the lawyers working together in Albatros, in our family business is the largest legal advisor in the Czech Republic, Havel and Partners. And ARCS, it's also interesting. That's actually a private equity fund. And that's not their investment, it's a kind of CSR activity for them. But, you know, when we talked to them, that was interesting. They said, impact investment is the future. And we have seen in the meantime also, and it's not really impact investment, but it's a sustainable investment, that private equity firms, venture capital firms, more private equity, I would say, look at investments in the meantime through the perspective of the ESG. So they have more and more as an investment criteria also these sustainable factors when they do an investment decision. And the guy actually who's leading the funds told me, I know when I'm going for my next fund to large institutional investors, they want to see that I'm dealing with this, that I'm able to apply ESG criteria. So I want to learn from you. So that was their motivation actually, why they joined us. And they give us a lot of support using their offices, for example, and knowledge, of course. And then there's a lot of other people, which I don't want to go much into detail because they're all private investors. And it just takes convincing awareness building. And awareness building was very essential because nobody knew about the concept of impact investment, you know. And most of them were excited about the idea, about making philanthropy more effective. That was their major motivation, I would say. But I've heard also, you know, declining words in the sense, okay, I'm doing either philanthropy or business, but I want to do both in the best way. So this is not for me, you know. Combining these things for them didn't seem really possible. Anyway, most of them actually went with us, invested, and so we could raise this fund. Sorry. Here's a short overview about the fund. don't want to go too much into technical details. It's a closed-end fund, to come back to the word close. That means it has a starting point and an end. And actually, the plan is to invest during 4 years and then another 5 years for divestments. We do invest in seed capital, which means this is very early stage of company and development. What we want to see, and I'll come back in a moment to this, is sort of proof of concept, that the concept works, the business model works, before we can invest. Yeah,
Silke,
yes.
I think you can also explain this term divestment. I think that would be helpful also for our call.
Yeah, that actually is very much connected to the financial instruments we are using. And I have to stop here for a moment because that was an interesting story. We plan to do actually loan financing, giving loans as the next step from grants, and supporting social organizations in building their business models. In this respect, a divestment would be a repayment of the loan. You know, that means not necessarily if you would now give the loan at the beginning, that we would wait a couple of years. Sometimes we do, because sometimes it needs patient capital before they repay. But that means divestment in general is getting your money back. You know, if you go into equity, that would mean actually selling the company and making your financial return from this exit. So that's divestment. And again, imagine a situation, an equity situation, for example, if you go into as a shareholder into a company at the end of the investment period, it needs at least 5 years before you can exit the company in these circumstances. So that defined actually the time frame. Does it answer your question, Eva? Is this in this respect?
Yeah. I was just thinking, just in terms of understanding, you know. So that
yeah. Thank you for the topic. Yeah. Okay. You all know the Sustainable Development Goals, which is really important for us, and it means in general in social impact investors, because it's a sort of a guidance where to invest in, and we actually track our portfolio companies against the SDGs. So that means one of the investment criteria, and the absolute first one, is it has to respond of at least one of the Sustainable Development Goals. Sorry. Over time, we actually thought about this investment thesis, which was very broad at the beginning, because the sector is very much at the beginning. We thought, okay, let's look for any kind of social impact we can find, as long as it responds to the SDGs and has a deep enough impact or scalable impact. But then over time, the last 2 years, we had actually a learning curve and try to define a little bit closer which actually are the sectors we want to invest in, which are relevant in the Czech Republic. And it's actually these 4: social inclusion and governance is not the right good word. I would call it civic participation rather. I come back to this. We have one investment in this area, civic empowerment, transparency, and social inclusion. Quality education, it's self-explaining. We haven't found so far a good investment in this area, but we are continuing searching. Environment and sustainability, that has really booming over the last 2 years, I would say, in terms of awareness actually. We see, I mean, this is a huge sector, green technology. The EU is giving a huge amounts of money in this sector. And to be frank, that's one of the areas we have often to look twice what we are going to do and what not, which is because let's talk about alternative energy, for example, that had been subsidized, even over-subsidized in our region, especially in the Czech Republic. So there have been a lot of investors in this area already. So we defined a little bit for us what we feel are areas which are new, which need support for innovations, and this is mainly the circular economy and responsible consumption. We look also at sustainable agriculture, biodiversity. We have seen projects in all of these areas, but we have invested in 2 companies which develop circular economy models. And then it's health and well-being, and again, it's really debatable. All the life science sector is, of course, impactful. So what we can do to contribute to the sector is look especially at disadvantaged groups and their access to good health and good life. So this is our short story, I would say. So we closed finally with closing again means raising the money and saying, well, that's it. We are not taking new fundraising on. And it was 2.5 million euro to translate this currency, strange currency, into euro, sorry. We have done 4 investments in the meantime. We started with StatLab, which is actually, by the way, an Ashoka fellow, the founder, and they are doing, they are IT guys and dealing with the sector of public tenders. And they had a non-for-profit organization, actually a kind of scoring for public institutions, how they're doing public tenders. And it's a field of corruption, few transparency, and mainly low efficiency. And if you think that 50% of our tax money goes into public tenders, actually, you should look twice how it's spent. So they added a business arm to it, developing products which would actually help public institutions to increase efficiency of public tenders. They came also recently up with a very good project in terms of impact, so-called red flag reports. So they do short audits and can identify actually where it looks there might be fraud or corruption involved or something like this. So that's there to introducing this quite successfully at the moment. And then we did MIWA, minimum waste, which is one of the companies I would like to show you a little bit closer at the end. The same is true for dot classes. And our last investment last year was in Circle, which is a B2B platform for trading waste material. And they are doing also consultancy for large companies for waste management. This company is really developing very well. Since inception, they have introduced this platform in now 5 countries, and it's really now a regional project already. So we're very happy with this. Sorry.
Can I ask a question here, please?
Sure. Shall I go back? So,
yeah, it says on this timeline that you defined your theory of change after your first investment. Does this mean that you have actually set yourself as an impact fund specific impact targets that you then try to achieve through the companies that you fund, or is it simply, you know, the let's say the logical framework approach to how you how you plan to get that impact? So do you have specific impact targets for yourself, or just the directions that you already?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you for this. Yeah, of course. I mean, we had the idea to do a pilot impact fund. But, you know, when we started to do, we ask ourselves, so what is our ultimate goal, actually? Where we want to get ourselves? What is it, the system change we want to achieve? Is it just to give money to 10 companies and that's it? Or what do we want to achieve? What's our own theory of change? That was the first purpose. And actually we came up with an interesting thing. We said to ourselves, yes, it is, the problem is here that there's not enough risk capital. So we want to be a provider for risk capital. But more important than just delivering the capital where it's needed is that we have let's say, a long-term vision. We want to be a fund manager which repeatedly does this. And we want to give examples, you know, that means through awareness building that more of these funds are happening, and it's, you know, it's already starting in this direction. So our own theory of change was what we want to achieve, and it had a second purpose which helped us very much. How to say, to check the ecosystem. To be successful, what do we need, you know? And by that time, for example, we defined, and it's maybe the right moment to stop here for a moment, because we changed actually a bit our approach. Let me explain this. We wanted to do, as I mentioned at the beginning, loans for social organization to enable them to develop business models. We found it very, very difficult, and still do, to find investable companies in this area, to be frank. So then we found, more by chance, MIVA and dot classes, the next two investments, were people with business experience. And they didn't come through a social accelerator program. They come to us because referral from business partners and I don't know what. But they were clearly from a different sector, you know. And that seemed to us, for the moment, a very good approach to search for these social entrepreneurs. And they're really strong personalities with a strong expertise, and they're really acknowledged person now in their sector, you know, so they're doing themselves a lot of awareness building. And by talking about our theory of change, we said, okay, we stand where we stand. We know very well the social sector. We started to cooperate with other ecosystem partners, and for example, doing this entrepreneurship course at the university and so on. But what we missed a little bit was actually how to get more involved in the commercial sector, to get in contact with the VCs, to get in their pipeline to see if we find the social entrepreneurs there. And that was a second result of this discussion, not only what we want to achieve, but what is really our ecosystem we need to be successful. And by that time, it was a turning point a little bit to look also on the other side more. And there were really the gaps, you know, where we said we need more to get into, you know. So that was a bit a long answer to this question, but thank you for this, because I think it was a turning point also for our fund and important to mention.
Thank you.
So I'm sure these guys, you won't know them, but as I mentioned at the beginning, they're so crucial to us because they're really very acknowledged business person and lead us in the startup investment, venture capital / private equity sector. Ondřej Bartoš was now the first person who brought a Central European, actually Romanian company to the New York Stock Exchange. Last month it was announced, so he's really a superstar in the sector, but the others as well. So this is great to have them on board. That's our advisory board, as I mentioned. Just want to mention, for example, Georg, who is actually director Ashoka and responsible for the European Fellowship. Very, very nice person, and they give us a lot of help with regard to the impact. We have now hired a new person for the advisory board, and it's also, he has a completely different background. He is a successful digital entrepreneur who started a huge NGO in the Czech Republic, and he will help us a little bit more with business insight for our investee companies. That's the fund structure, and at this point, Eva asked me also to talk a little about the legal structure. To be frank, I'm not sure if it's an ideal solution to recommend, because we came across with a lot of problems involved. This is not the legal structure, this is the business structure, and I explained it before. That means the fund is investing on behalf of the investors into these investee companies, and when the money returns, it goes through the funds and back directly to the investors. So that's plus minus how it works. We promised our investors to generate below market return, far below, I have to say, because it's our first fund, and we want to see how it goes, but I think I hope we will have a positive return still. Since the fund is small, it has a problem also in terms of size. It can't work economically efficiently. So maybe, I don't know if you have knowledge from the investment sector, but you normally, as a fund manager, live from a management fee, which is normally 2.5% per annum. And to do this well, it's said that 20 million euro is a sort of minimum size to do this economically efficiently, to pay your management, right salaries, and do what you have to do. We have a budget of a tenth of this, 2.5 million euro. So per definition, the share of our operating costs is higher than 2.5%. It's about the double. Nevertheless, we have chosen this structure. Now I will explain it a little bit closer. We have chosen actually an endowment fund structure and tried nevertheless to copy all the features of a venture capital fund. A classical venture capital fund has a partnership model. That means the fund manager is the general partner who takes the risk, let's say, and the limited partners are the investors. Don't want to explain too much because beyond what we want to achieve today, but a classical structure also would be this closed-end structure, that it is a beginning of a fund and the end, and you have a defined investment period where your management fee is normally a bit higher than for the rest when you're exiting, because it's assumed that you would raise the next fund. That's how a VC fund works. Also important, in venture capital and private equity, fund managers are motivated by a financial return they make at the end. When all the companies are sold and a certain minimum amount is paid back to the investors, then they have a so-called carried interest. It means it's normally 20% of the proceeds from selling these companies. In the circumstances of a social impact fund, and it's also true for us, the milestone is not so much the financial return, but the fulfillment of the social KPIs. But to be frank, our motivation financially is even fulfilling all the social KPIs is really more symbolic in this small fund size, as you can imagine. Anyway, we have chosen a legal structure of an endowment fund. How to explain? It was a small fund, first of all. And if you set up a classical VC structure, venture capital structure, it's costly. It's costly, and not only the setup, but also the regulatory issues, because that requires administration, which is quite costly at the end. So we try to organize it in another way. So we thought, let's do it a foundation, or in this case, an endowment fund. And what it means is that our investors are giving us gifts, actually, and they give us also money for the investment, capital for the investment. That's divided. So the gift money actually would pay our operating costs, and the investment money goes straight into the investment. It is a bit tricky, to be frank. And there was another point. You have as a fund manager, of course, the obligation by law to do your best in the interest of your investors, which means in classical sense, financial return. We have in our agreements with our investors that financial return is not our first target. It's creating impact. So you can actually, strictly spoken, get into conflict with the law if a financial investor would actually sue you that you gave preference to impact instead of financial return. That was one of the concerns, so, and it was so new, so we decided to go into the endowment fund. But it's a nightmare in terms of accounting, I can tell you, because actually Czech law defines a lot what actually can be financed by endowment or foundation money as a gift, and it's limited. So it's a nightmare. So I don't have really, and we can discuss a little bit later, but a larger fund should definitely have a classical venture capital, let's say, partnership structure. This is so important, but I think that's all your expertise. We give a lot of non-financial support. I mentioned this already at the beginning. We have this huge pro bono network, actually, which helps us. And as I said, people from our investment committee, which are also our investors, by the way, they give us a lot of additional support, us in doing the right decisions. And they meet also with our investees and give them some consultancy and so on. So we support our investees from the very beginning with strategy formulation, theory of change, leadership development, all the stuff you do as a hands-on investor. Awareness, I will come back, that was especially important at the beginning when we raised the fund, but it's still very much an important issue. So what are our investment criteria? Simply spoken, we need to see a clear social mission. This has a measurable and scalable impact. And it's often also about the question, is it really measurable? And is there a clear connection between what a company is doing and what the overall impact is? Because it's mostly contributes to the impact of a social system, let's call it. So we look at this relationship also very closely. In terms, of course, and then you need to have a sustainable business model, a scalable, a growing business model. In terms of timing, as I mentioned, we want to see a pilot project which was successful, something which proves us that the project works, the product works, and there are customers who would buy it. And last but not least, and that's always the most important, it's the strong management team. And we have really different criteria here. One of them is the intention of the manager and the founder to go into impact. There's a short look at our pipeline because, as I mentioned, and you can imagine, pipeline is difficult, it's still difficult. In terms of numbers, these are not completely up to date. It's from last September, I guess. We have now, let's call it maybe 300, I would say 80 projects we have seen, which may seem to you a lot, but compared to a VC fund, it's really a small percentage. But it's getting better. Sector is growing, and looking about sector distribution, Friday for Future, this movement has really made a difference in terms of awareness about the climate challenge. So we see really much more projects which serve the protection of the environment. Social inclusion, we have seen quite a few, healthcare, mental health, education, food quality and waste is also an increasingly important subject. And then some philanthropy or CSR related projects. Let's talk about impact measurement, since it's so important for impact funds, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it's actually a tricky thing always, you know. So let's talk a little bit about the impact dimension of our fund. First, of course, it plays a role in how you select your projects. And selecting the projects, we have different criteria. As I mentioned, we look first at the impact, of course at the other things like a normal VC fund would do it, the team credibility, the business potential, the market opportunity, the project stage, and last but not least, what we can as a fund contribute. Is it the right place for us to go in? Can we contribute to help the company? I want to talk not about all of them, just about the impact. So we have broken this down a little bit to different areas we are looking at. As I mentioned earlier, this is the intentionality of the founder to go into impact, a clear social problem defined, and how he wants to resolve this. This is key. It should respond to one of the SDGs or more. We want to see the theory of change and impact thesis where it wants to get. And then we look at impact on its depth and its scale, its scaling possibility. Something I would like to mention, which is actually for fund decisions very important, it's the alignment between social impact and financial return. That means, can the project go in a mission drift? We define it as a mission drift. If you invest in a company, it's for a couple of years, for quite some long time, and a lot can happen in between. So if the business model as such is creating big impact, then it's fine, then you're fine. But if you have a product which can go into impact or can in a completely different direction, we have to take this risk into account. And I will tell you a little bit later how we deal with it if it's interesting to you. So, and all these sub points we have then given certain levels of development to make our investment decision easier. So what would it be in an ideal case is then like 3 points, 3 scoring points, and where they stand, if there's nothing at all, then it's 0. So, and that gives us a chance at the very beginning to create actually, you know, some foundation for our decision making. So now for the entire project, it's had different phases. So how we deal with impact here. I spoke about the screening phase, and we have really got inspired by the pioneers in the industry like Bridges Ventures. They use this impact radar as well. Tonic has also a nice screening resources. I spoke about this already. Once we make the next step and go into due diligence, we use the impact management project a lot, which helps us to look from different angles on the dimensions of impact. And the most tricky one from experience is always to see what happens to the impact development without this project. What is actually the contribution of this project? And can we measure this? Can we make a clearly quantifiable relationship here? And then by the end, we define an impact strategy together with the investee companies. It becomes actually a part of the investment agreement. So we look at these KPIs and we try to interconnect the things. For example, if you make an investment, we try to do it in tranches to reduce the risk. And for the second tranche, for example, we would say, the company has to achieve these and these KPIs, which are business KPIs, but also impact KPIs. And I can talk about a little bit later about such structures. If we have a loan, now we are working on a loan, for example, we try to give at the end a kind of risk premium, which would very much depend on the achievement of the overall impact of this company. So if the impact KPIs have been met by the end, they pay less, a lot less. If not, let's say it went more in a business direction, then they would pay much more to us. And then in the post-investment phase, it's clear then you deal with driving the impact actually and giving advisory. As I mentioned before, our team is really very motivated financially, also more on a symbolic level, on meeting the impact KPIs across the entire portfolio of our companies.
Can I ask a question here as well?
Yes, please do.
That was a very interesting point about the impact premium or the risk premium. I mean, in general, you can perceive this the other way. You could say that the company can see this as a fee that they pay if they don't want to generate impact, they decide not to generate impact. Rather than, I mean, you know, if it's their mission to generate impact, then they go after the mission.
Yeah.
But if they're making money and there is this risk of mission drift, as you said, then this is simply a fee that they have to pay. And they might say, okay, we're making so much profit that forget about our impact, we'll pay this fee and we'll just go and become a commercial business.
Yes, thank you. We deal a lot with this. Thank you for this question. And that's the second dimension, how we deal with it. It's not only the positive motivation to create the impact, but we always say, if this alignment does not exist, if there's the possibility of a mission drift, we put it in our agreements and we say, okay, if it's a loan, it's repayable immediately. Yeah, because then they will probably make enough money if they're not going bust. It can also happen to do so. And we said, okay, we of course, if you give a loan, you're not in a shareholder position, you know, and you can't really prevent them, you know. You can only motivate them, and I don't know, but finally you can't prevent them. So if that would happen, we said you can do this, but without us. You repay us immediately. Then we put our money elsewhere. And since we went the last 3 investments in equity structures, we have in one deal, we saw this possibility, which did not realize at all, but there's a risk and you have to deal with it. And we said, okay, if this is the case, you buy back our share in the company. So you have to, you can take care of this, and you should,
Yeah,
I think, because it's one of the largest or the highest risk you are facing in this kind of investment. Well, awareness building, I spoke about this, is really crucial, and we do a lot in these social accelerator programs and around the Impact Hub. And then there's, we are now, as I said, we go also very much into the VC sector. So we are participating also in classical startup competitions and being a member of the jury, for example. We try to, of course, present ourselves at events. I'm proud of this cooperation with the university because I think that's very important for the entire sector for the future. And we are very proud. I'm not sure if it's in the Czech Republic, it's very popular, the SDG Awards every year. It has a high prestige, and actually 3 out of our 4 investees were awarded this award in the category of social business. So I think that proves only that we're doing the right things, hopefully. I would like to introduce to you in the last minutes of my quite long presentation, sorry for that, 2 of our portfolio companies, just to give you a glance what we are doing. This company, it's actually a bit an exception, dot classes, because normally our investment criteria would say for the moment it should be a Czech company or having impact in the Czech Republic. This is a Czech company, but they're creating impact in the developing world, Africa and Asia. And the founder came up with the brilliant idea to have a new radical business model in the area of glasses, and to help to resolve a huge problem. Still, billions of people around the world are visually impaired and have no access to good eyeglasses. So he came up with an interesting solution, which is I would say a second best solution. That means by reducing the range and availability of diopters to the most probable ones, and also with a model which one fits all size, and also the lenses are agnostic, so you can exchange the left and the right. It came production extremely cheap, and also including transport. The overall model is very effective. Also, it creates jobs at the end, because they work a lot with organizations of micro entrepreneurs, and the micro entrepreneur might be also an eye clinic. It might be also other channels, let's say, but they get a simple vision testing kit so they can test on the ground and assemble the glasses on the ground in less than a minute. Interesting to say, well, I have to admit the company has been hit very much by the Corona crisis because of all the travel restrictions, and we invested actually at the beginning of last year. But talking about mission drift, I was afraid at the beginning when we started to spoke to him that it might be, let's say, the TENS model in a shop in a big city in Africa. And it's not that there wouldn't be glasses, you know, in large cities. We wanted them to get to the real poor people. So we designed actually our impact KPIs very much on the target groups, who actually is the receiver, who actually receives these glasses. And the plan is that more than 80% should actually go to these defined target groups, as you can see here. And to be frank, what I see now, their efforts, they work a lot with NGOs, with global development programs and so on. And most of the classes entirely also go actually to these target groups. But, you know, when you think about impact and designing your KPIs, I just wanted to give you this example. It might be also in this way defined, not only how many glasses they sell, but to whom actually. You have to think the impact first, what you want to achieve, and then set up your KPIs. That's very important. Again, they were hit by the Corona crisis heavily, but last year they still, until summer, raised capital and have raised actually €1 million in seed capital. So that was very successful. We have actually co-invested with a Belgian impact fund, with a Czech VC fund, which was actually surprising. And many, many business angels, most of them from Western Europe. They've been able in the last year, in spite of not being able to travel there, not really, not much. They built a sales organization in 15 countries. So they're expanding quite quickly. This is another portfolio company. This is MIWA, Minimum Waste. It was our first investment in the area of circular economy. And they came up with a solution for, let me see, I just want to know. Oh, that was actually the first slide on this. So you can see actually how it looks like. The system for packaging free sale. They call it actually reuse, because these are small containers which are actually rotating between the producer of the food and the retailer. And then the customer has this intelligent cup and it communicates with the technology. The point of sales are connected with the cashier system. And they can, as a customer, you can also shop by an app actually from home. And that communicates also with the producer. So they always know when the next stock refill will be necessary. This is a very complex system, which makes it actually a bit difficult to implement. Nevertheless, they have started in the Czech Republic with some pilot projects, and then cooperate mostly with Nestle in Switzerland. And then actually they developed more for them in terms of product range it can be used. Now recently they introduced it in Paris, in Intermarché, and they had their second round of financing and raised, well, actually in a very difficult time last year at the beginning of the Corona crisis, another €1 million from a German strategic investor. So when you look as an impact investor at such environmental project, every project has positive and negative impact, and you have to take this into account. So we made at the beginning a life cycle assessment, taking into account, for example, the entire material delivery and consumer loop, and to see what does it take to produce these parts, to recycle them. They can be used a couple of 100 times, but at a certain point in time has to be recycled as well. Transport costs, washing these capsules. So you have to take all this into account. And that was at the beginning of the investment, so it's a prediction. And then you work on this over the investment period to follow what happens, you know. And at the beginning, they are still on setting up this entire value chain, which needs a certain amount of size as well to have, for example, a decentralized washing station near to the supplier. So it's in development, but nevertheless, we want to achieve what is written here. So it's 71% lower negative environmental impact in terms of CO2 emissions, in overall impact, and 50 to 60% in lower carbon footprint. By the way, it's interesting if you do a couple of these projects in the environmental sector, finally it can all be broken down in the carbon footprint, because finally it has to result into this. So when we screen projects, we try to get an estimate at the beginning to make these projects a bit comparable. Also, they are quite different. And if they are not that high in this promise of lower core profitability, then they have to deliver something else still. And I have to say, all our projects deliver something else, especially this company, are very much active in awareness building, the reuse economy. They work together with the European Commission. They have been awarded actually Social Innovation Prize from the European Commission. They are quoted best practice in a lot of publications. They're working with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They are part of a working group in the World Economic Forum. And that's what we want to see of our social entrepreneurs. And that's also why I call them social entrepreneurs. You know, these are the guys on the front line. And I think that's it for now. And well, it was long, hope not too boring. So let's discuss a little bit.
Yeah, long, but I think really very informative. Thank you so much, Silke. So the floor is yours. If you have any specific questions about the model or any activities related to setting up the funds, feel free to unmute and just ask questions.
Yes, I have short question. Probably I missed the beginning. I'm sorry if yes. What is the legal status of your organization?
Yeah, that's as I said, it's at the moment for this small fund, it's an endowment fund or foundation, let's call it.
Foundation. So it's specific. So it's not charity foundation, no.
No, it's called an endowment fund, and the purpose of the fund is actually to making the investments into social good. Yeah. So as I said, our investors are giving us gifts to finance the operations, and they give money to invest in the companies, which is a separate thing.
Okay. So basically, by law, you as a foundation, you can basically give grants, you can do loans, and you can also become an equity shareholder with the company, right? That's in Czech Republic, that's possible, right?
Yeah, it was a sort of, it's not ideal. Again, we have a lot of struggling how to allocate actually, because it has always to fulfill a certain purpose, which is given by law. It's complicated. I'm not sure if I would recommend this. If you set up, but it's in a question of size again, you know, and local structures, which are quite different, you know. In the meantime, in the Czech Republic are structures available, which you might use as well, which are more for venture capital, let's say, and these are the partnership structures I mentioned before. So a fund structure, if you want to set up a certain size, that was, you know, what we set up was a kind of pilot project to start with. But if you want to set up a fund, I would recommend rather a classical fund structure. And it might differ from country to country, you know.
Yeah, thank you.
I have another small question. Christina, you want to go first? I think you unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Nazareth. Thank you, Silke, for the presentation. It was very interesting. My question is regarding other investors that the social enterprises have attracted. So how do you manage expectations of other investors and your expectations? So if, for example, DOTS has several investors, the expectations might be different. So do you cooperate with each other, or how do you work with them?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Christine. That's very important. You have to align interests. And if I have something learned in business, that it's alignment of interest is the key thing for doing good business in general, and especially in this case here. You have to be careful with any co-investors to be on the same page. Let's take dot classes as a good example, because there are many investors, and you make clear first, you discuss with them, and these are all social business angels, I would say mainly. Then there's an impact fund, and it's without discussion. We have the same goal, but there is also a normal VC. So yes, we made very clear what we expect. We have been the lead investor in this, and they've, for the moment, they really leave the lead of this also to us in terms of operations, I have to say. They get not much involved. For them, it's a small investment. But, you know, that was also one of the reasons we have this mission clause. That's a statement not only for the company, but also for the other investors, you know. But you cooperate on a nearly daily basis. We have, for example, monthly investors meeting, you know. So there is this constant discussions among this group, and to make sure you are always on the same line. And there is absolutely no conflict so far. All we are looking for the impact to be created here. But it's an important point. So make sure with whom you are co-invest. Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned several times that Czech Republic is a small market and Armenia is even smaller. So one of the questions is on this issue of expertise. So for example, the life cycle assessment that you did for your investment for media it requires a lot of specific expertise. And some issues that we have in our country, for example, is that the people who have this expertise locally are already the ones who are involved in one way or the other with this initiative, with the company or with the project. So do you find often that you need to bring this expertise from outside the Czech Republic, or is this not an issue that you have at the moment? Or is this, do you need these kinds of independent experts for each of the companies that you want to fund?
Well, in an ideal case, you would search for the best expert, but to be frank, it's also a question of budget, you know. So it's, practically spoken, there are areas we wouldn't touch if we would be convinced we don't understand them. And the others we try to understand. And it's simply, we have built in the meantime a network for people in different areas, which we would call, get their opinion on this. It's never perfect. You take risks, of course. And for example, this is maybe a bit different than classical VC. This life cycle assessment was done in cooperation with the company. This is not that they would have one and we would have another one, you know, to counter check. But they hired a specialist in their own interest because they want to demonstrate the impact they make. And it was important to show to investors, you know. So it's not that conflicting, I would say. And it's not so much the size of the country which limits us, but in comparison with classical investment funds, it's more the restriction of money you have, you know. So you have partly rely on your own assessment. We make a lot of our own research, call up your network partners, contacts, you know, and it's as easy or as complicated as it is, you know.
Thank you.
And then there's a certain portion of trust, I would say, you know, which is maybe also different from classical investments. If you go with these people, we don't look also in our legal documentation, not at the highest level of risk protection, you know. We do some groundwork, we have to protect the interests of our investors, but there is a certain portion of trust as well, you know. And if you don't have this trust, people, you're not going to invest.
Okay, any other questions?
I have one more question. When you were talking about the financial instruments like loans, equity, and there was mentioned also on the slide mezzanine finances. Yeah, I have read about it, but I can't still understand what it is. So could you provide more?
Sure. that was our initial intention to go mainly into mezzanine instrument. I will explain you. It's in financial terms, it means something between a loan and an equity structure. So in a classical sense, it would also rank in terms of risk between loans and equity. You get a higher return than a normal loan, but you take a higher risk as well. That means other loans would be repaid before that loan, for example. That's one thing. So it's subordinated, it's called. The other thing is that in classical sense, they would take, what they call an equity kicker, a percentage, as a remuneration part of the equity. This is a classical mezzanine structure. In social finance, we use this a bit differently, and we want to say just this is a very flexible loan structures. It's not a classical loan. So for example, we give very long grace periods, much longer than the commercial sector. That means before they have to repay, now we are doing nearly 3 years in one loan, we taking a risk premium, which is also not normal in a loan structure. What else is different? For example, once we did at our first investment, one tranche of the loan was a bullet loan, which means this is nearly equity, because in the sector you are often restricted with equity. You have a social organization in which you sometimes legally can't invest in equity, or sometimes it's also the problem that the organization, you will never sell it. They don't want to exit this company, this organization, because it has a social purpose. So it doesn't make sense to go into an equity structure. So what you can do, you can sort of copy equity. For example, you give a loan, and that I would call mezzanine, which is a bit a social definition of mezzanine loans. That doesn't repay at all. And at 5 years' time, you expect the company to repay it by a commercial loan, for example, and you can get your money back, which is a risky structure. So you want to have some return for it. But that's all I would call mezzanine in a social sense. So we try to adapt loan structures really to the needs of the company. In this sense, I would call it mezzanine. And I have to add, that was the original intention, let's say, to do this kind of soft loans. But we said actually only exceptionally would do equity if there's this growth potential and the exit that you can expect. But then we have done the majority actually in equity, which was a turning point also in our fund. Because they have this growth potential, so why not to go into equity?
Okay, any other question? If not, I have a question. So I have a question. I wanted to ask you, Silke, about the success factors to set up a fund like that. And obviously one, which I don't want you to mention, but maybe you can list some others. And I see it also from the example of Smart Collective that we had a meeting with a couple of weeks ago, but also this Valores fund that I was presenting, that there has to be a driver, right? There has to be a super passionate person like yourself. Preferably the person should be connected to potential investors, be credible with her or his own history. So a key person, I'm sure that's one of the success factors for initiatives like that. But if from your experience, if you could give a couple of advices, like what are the other elements that are critical when you are starting working on an initiative like that, that would be good.
Well, thank you for this question. Look, I think in general, what is a bit a problem at least in our region, as we know, I'm not sure, but I guess it's the same in your countries. There is still very much a gap between the social sector and the commercial sector. Yeah, and I remember when I was in Yerevan at this conference, and we were talking about somebody from the Impact Hub. They wanted to set up an accelerator program, and I told them, you go to the commercial sector. They are certainly we see existing, or there are maybe startup accelerator programs for technology. That's where you have to go for the right advice, because you need this business knowledge, you know. So, and I think that's a general advice. Try to overcome these borders between we are doing our social thing and they doing their venture capital thing. These are the bad guys, you know. Because I think it's much more not recently, for some time already, interlinked. And that's what we found. It was our most important learning lessons, to find social entrepreneurs, go to the startup scene, you know, to do your thing well. I mean, drive your companies, develop them, get the knowledge from the commercial sector, because they have been existing for 30 years, let's say. There is a certain ecosystem and expertise is there, you know, and let's combine both things. And this combination in our fund, it's in all levels, you know. It's in the level of our team. We have 1-2 guys which came from the classical business sector, which had the technical knowledge how to structure such an investment, financial modeling and all this stuff. And then we have 2 person or 1 person who is only, her background is so much impact. And even we 2 founders are complementary in this respect, you know. And I think it's important. And then we have people all from the business world in our investment committee, because they help us to do the right decisions, you know, because it's still a business, you know, we are investing in. And they leave it up to us, and we get the support of the investors from the foundations to develop the impact, you know. So I think it's important. We should not think too much into the box of the social sector. Yeah. Get your help also from, and then it's where you find finally your investors, you know. Of course, these are philanthropists, but these are business people as well. And try to get them involved, not only as people who give you money, but we need their expertise, their contacts, their networks. That's makes it work. And even the advisors from all level, all advisors are business advisors, but you need them for these kind of transactions as well. And it's finally nothing so different when we worked with Boston Consulting Group for defining the strategy of one of our investees. They can take the perspective. They're always calculated also, if you go this way and you do this and this step, you will create so much and so much impact. You know, if you give them a kind of advice how you would define impact, then you can quantify it. And, you know, that was a great help. So it's learning from each other, let's say, and that's maybe the most important advice I would like to give. And the driving person, yeah, I mean, everything we are doing, any new foundation, any new fund, anything needs a driving person, you know. Now, somebody has to start it, you know. And that at the beginning is always difficult. I remember when I was thinking so much, should I do this or not, and why, and so on. And it was then the power. I recently told it to some students, you know, it works for me. If once you tell it other people, you feel somehow committed to do it, you know, and at the same time you get them involved, you know. So then I started this message, even if I was thinking myself, should I do it or should I not? And I was like, okay, I will do this, and will you join me? And then, okay, so, well, what did I say? Now I have to do it, you know. So you have to overcome.
Yeah.
I mean, then it's a snowball effect, you know, then it goes by itself, more or less.
Great. Thank you. All right. So do we have any other questions? I'm on my phone, so I can't see everyone, but are there any other questions or reflections or comments?
I have one more question. Yeah.
Okay.
You mentioned that at the beginning, so the prehistory of Tillia Impact Ventures was that you raised money and you gave this money as grants, yes?
Yeah.
So this is our history too. This will be, I think. So we are still the foundation, we are still giving grants, and the venture fund that we will establish, we are going to establish, we'll start by giving grants because we have this EU funded project with the EVPA. However, we are thinking about using other financial instruments in the future. So what you come like from the finance with the finance background, so what is the advantage of using these other financial instruments like loans and equity, and so compared with grants?
Wow, that's a very complex question, and I think everybody will have an opinion about it here. But I found, as I told you, when I was doing this Nest Partnership Program, this venture philanthropy program, we realized with both the companies that they would have been able to finally return the money, you know, because they were growing, and that's the important thing. They were growing and therefore creating more impact, but also they had more the revenues, which was fine for them. And I think it gives this this push to go in this business direction a little bit further, you know. And I have to say, it is not suitable for all social purpose organizations. Is it not? Is it not? And in all the social accelerator programs, and I've been in a lot, we have also applications sometimes where I think, no, this is not the right way to go. For example, I don't know, patient organizations or so, you know. Who should pay for it? Of course, there are sophisticated financial systems or social finance structures which would involve the state, you know, or there are these wonderful structures of pay for success, where actually an investor would give money, and then let's say a state organization or any large organization who is interested would in replacing a social service by something better, I would say, would check the quality over time and repay from the savings they made, actually, you know. So that could involve even the state, but I don't want to go that complicated. In a very basic level, it's a question of direction. So if a business model is possible, you know, and this is not, again, this is not for all social purpose organizations, but if you see a market, if something can be a product sold to a certain target group, and again, the target group and the paying customers, not necessarily the same, you know, not necessarily. But if you see a business model, then of course is much higher stimulus to develop this business if you have the money to give back, you know. That's my personal opinion, but I'm not sure if Andrea, you deal a lot with both with grants and loans, but I see this motivating factor here, actually.
Yeah, I agree definitely, and it enables basically to do more social good, and that's the main point. If you have a bigger business, and then you use, as a regular business, you would use variety of financial instruments. So it's not if you stick to grants, you will stay, I would say, at a certain level of development. These other financial instruments enables you to grow more. So that's the main point of it.
Yeah, that was the motivation of our first two investors, the large foundations, you know, to make this more effective from their side. The money would come back and they can use it again.
Yeah,
It also changes I think, Silke, you mentioned that, right? That it is also changing. So on one hand, there are arguments for the investors, right? To invest with other financial instruments. But I think you, Silke, mentioned this gap between the social organizations, right? That using other instruments, it also forces them to look at the financials a bit more carefully, right? If you get free money, you get free money, right? If you have to pay it back, you have to be more careful, right? In terms of how you spend, how you locate your, how you pay things, right? It just requires more diligence on the side of the business, right?
a completely different approach. I'm now dealing with a Dutch organization. This is through Ashoka, and we have created a group of women investors supporting female-led organizations in Ashoka. And this is our first case, and it's interesting because they are in the transition process between a social grant organization into a social business. And and I have seen this so many times. It's a completely different logic, you know. I mean, and I want to exaggerate it a little bit now. Social purpose organization makes a budget every year. You know, they say, okay, we want to do these and these and these activities, and we need this and this money for this. You know, if you want to be on the business line, the logic is different. You start to say, okay, how can I make revenues? And only if I have the revenues, I can spend it. So what can I do? What kind of costs can I actually incur? You know, not to be in a loss situation at the end. You know, so it's a completely opposite logic, and it requires really a different way of thinking. So, and I often recommend you get people from business on board to help you to make this transition, you know. But it's already in terms of planning completely different, you know. And yeah, this transition process is not easy. And we have in the social finance world also these hybrid models, and it's absolutely fine, you know. The organization I was talking about right now, they were starting from grants, and there's still grant financing, but they want to reduce it. And the major motivation is always to become independent from grant financing, because it's always a one-time thing. Once you have stable revenues and you are a business which works, then you don't need to go for fundraising anymore, you know, but you have to take care of your business that it's growing, you know. So, and this is mostly the motivation for the social enterprise, to become independent from one-time fund raising success grant financing. Yeah.
All right. Any more? Last chance. No, I'm scrolling my screen to see. No. All right, great. So in this case, thank you so much, Silke. I think this was really, really interesting, and really a lot of very, very good insights. We'll have the recordings, we'll share it for those who couldn't join, and then we'll put it also into our library once we have the website set up also for the project. So really, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope you guys, you will all make it through the wave, through grants, loans, and equity financing, whatever you prefer. And I hope we will see one time in the future in person. I would really love this.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, we have the 4 years, for something years of the project, so I hope that you'll be, you know, one of the first people to come to some of our regional activities as well. Absolutely.
Looking forward very much. Looking forward very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Silke.
Thank you
much.
very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a nice day.